The dust devil swirled across the prairie grass like a phantom as Gideon Hartley rode the fence line of his sprawling Montana ranch, never expecting that this August morning in 1882 would change everything he thought he knew about loneliness and second chances. He spotted the wagon first, tilted at an unnatural angle in the shallow ravine that cut through the eastern boundary of his property. The canvas cover had torn loose on one side and flapped weakly in the hot wind. Gideon urged his bay mare forward, his hand instinctively moving to the rifle in his saddle scabbard. It was not uncommon to find abandoned wagons out here, but something about this one made his chest tighten with unease. As he drew closer, he heard it, a sound so unexpected in this harsh landscape that he thought at first the heat was playing tricks on him. Crying. Not one voice, but two, the thin wails of infants cutting through the August stillness. Gideon dismounted quickly, ground tying his horse as he scrambled down the rocky slope. The wagon's rear wheel had snapped clean through, probably hitting a hidden boulder at speed. Supplies were scattered everywhere. Flour sacks burst open, a broken water barrel leaking the last of its precious contents into the thirsty earth. But it was the figure huddled in the wagon's shade that stopped him cold. A young woman lay there, her dark blonde hair matted with sweat and dust, her dress torn and stained. She was conscious, barely, her arms wrapped protectively around two bundles that squirmed and cried with surprising vigor given the circumstances. Her eyes, a startling shade of green even dulled by exhaustion and pain, fixed on him with a mixture of desperation and defiance. "Please," she whispered, her voice cracked and raw. "My babies. Help my babies." Gideon dropped to his knees beside her, his rancher's hand surprisingly gentle as he assessed the situation. Her leg was twisted beneath her at an angle that made his stomach turn, clearly broken. Blood had soaked through her skirt from a gash on her thigh. He could see the fever flush on her cheeks, the way her whole body trembled. "How long have you been here?" he asked, already knowing the answer would not be good. "2 days," she managed. "Maybe 3, I lost count. The wagon, we hit something. My husband, he was thrown. His neck." Her eyes filled with tears that spilled down her dusty cheeks. "He died right away. I could not reach him, could not bury him. The babies, they kept crying, and I had so little water left." Gideon looked around and spotted the body about 20 feet from the wagon, already swollen in the heat. He turned his attention back to the woman and the infants. "I am going to get you to my ranch. It is about 5 miles west of here. Can you hold on that long? I do not have a choice, do I?" Despite everything, there was steel in her voice. "What is your name?" Gideon asked as he carefully began to examine her injuries. Fiona Owens. These are my daughters, Emma and Alina. They are only 4 months old." Her grip on the babies tightened. "Promise me, if I do not make it, you will not leave them here. Promise me they will be safe." "You are going to make it," Gideon said firmly. "And they are going to be safe. All 3 of you. I give you my word." He worked quickly, splinting her leg with pieces of the broken wagon and strips torn from his own shirt. The woman, Fiona, bit down on a piece of leather to keep from screaming and waking the babies, who had finally exhausted themselves into fitful sleep. Gideon could not help but admire her strength. He had seen grown men cry over injuries less severe than what she was enduring. Getting her onto his horse proved to be the hardest part. She was thin, too thin, but the babies added weight and bulk that made the logistics challenging. Finally, he settled her in front of him, the twins bundled securely against her chest, while he controlled the horse from behind, one arm around her waist to keep her steady. "What about my husband?" she asked as they began the slow journey west. "I will come back with men and a wagon," Gideon promised. We will bury him proper with words over his grave. You have my word on that, too." The ride back to the ranch felt like it took days instead of hours. Fiona drifted in and out of consciousness, her head lolling back against Gideon's shoulder. The babies woke several times, crying pitifully, and there was nothing either of them could do except keep moving. Gideon found himself talking to her, keeping up a steady stream of words to anchor her to consciousness. "My spread is called the Hartley Ranch. It has been in my family for 15 years now. My father started it, and when he and my mother passed 5 years back from cholera, it came to me. I run about 3,000 head of cattle and have 20 hands working for me. It is a good operation. The house is solid, built from timber we hauled down from the mountains. There is a well with sweet water, and my cook, Maria, she is the best in 3 counties. She will take good care of you and your girls." Whether Fiona heard him or not, he could not tell, but talking helped him as much as it might help her. It kept the fear at bay, the knowledge that this woman might die before he could get her home, that these babies might become orphans before they could even remember their mother's face. But they made it. As the sun began its descent toward the western mountains, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold, the Hartley Ranch came into view. It was a sight that always made Gideon's chest swell with pride: the sturdy log house with its wide porch, the barns and outbuildings painted a fresh red, the corrals filled with good horses, the distant specks of cattle grazing on the rich grassland. Home. Men came running as soon as they spotted him. His foreman, Tom Brennan, reached them first, his weathered face creasing with concern. "Boss, what happened? Who is this? Found her in a ravine east of here. Wagon wreck. She needs a doctor, and these babies need milk and care. Get someone to Miles City for Doc Morrison. Fast." Within minutes, the ranch had transformed into organized chaos. Maria, a solid woman in her 50s with kind eyes and capable hands, took charge of Fiona and the twins, clucking her tongue and issuing orders in a mixture of English and Spanish. They carried Fiona into the house, into Gideon's own bedroom since it was the largest and had the best light. The babies were whisked away to the kitchen where Maria immediately began preparing a mixture of goat's milk and water to feed them. Gideon stood in the doorway of his bedroom, watching as Maria and her daughter Rosa carefully cut away Fiona's ruined dress and began cleaning her wounds. He should leave, he knew, give her privacy, but something kept him rooted to the spot until Maria finally shooed him away with a stern look. "You did good, Mr. Gideon," she said. "Now let us do our work. Go, eat. You look ready to fall over." He did not go far, just to the kitchen where he could hear the twins fussing as Rosa tried to feed them. They were tiny things, red-faced and angry at the world, with wisps of blonde hair and eyes that had not yet settled into their final color. Emma had a small birthmark on her left cheek. Elinor's hair seemed slightly darker. Otherwise, they were mirror images of each other. "Will they take the milk?" Gideon asked, surprised by how much the answer mattered to him. "They are hungry enough to try anything," Rosa said with a smile. "Look, this one is drinking already." Gideon found himself reaching out to touch one tiny hand, marveling at how small it was, how delicate. The baby's fingers closed around his thumb with surprising strength, and something in his chest cracked open. Some wall he had built after his parents died, after the loneliness of running this ranch alone had taught him not to need anyone. Doc Morrison arrived 3 hours later, his black bag in hand and his face grim. He was a compact man in his 60s who had been doctoring in Montana Territory since, before it was even officially organized. If anyone could save Fiona, it was him. Gideon paced the porch while the doctor worked, smoking cigarette after cigarette even though he rarely indulged. Tom joined him after a while, leaning against the railing. "We brought the husband's body back," Tom said quietly. "It was not pretty. Heat got to him. We wrapped him in canvas and put him in the root cellar until we can get him in the ground. Thank you. We will bury him tomorrow if the woman is conscious enough to say some words." "Who is she, boss? Where was she headed?" "I do not know yet. She was barely coherent. Married, obviously. Heading somewhere with her family." Gideon paused. "Now she has nothing. No husband, no wagon, no supplies, just 2 babies and a broken leg." Tom was quiet for a moment. "What are you going to do with them?" "I have not figured that out yet." But even as he said it, Gideon knew he was lying. Some decision had already been made in his heart during that long ride home, feeling Fiona's weight against him, hearing those babies cry. He just had not admitted it to himself yet. Doc Morrison emerged as the last light was fading from the sky. He looked tired but satisfied. "She will live," he announced, and Gideon felt his knees go weak with relief. "The leg is set, though it was a nasty break. She will be laid up for at least 6 weeks, maybe 8. The infection from that gash on her thigh is the bigger worry. I have cleaned it out as best I can, but the next few days will tell the tale. If the fever breaks, she should be fine. If it does not—" He trailed off, the implication clear. What does she need? Rest, fluids, and someone to watch her around the clock. Change the bandages twice a day, keep her cool when the fever spikes. And those babies need feeding every few hours. You have taken on quite a responsibility here, Gideon. "I could not exactly leave them to die." Doc Morrison smiled. "No, I suppose you could not. You are a good man, Gideon Hartley. Your parents raised you right." He picked up his bag. "I will come back tomorrow to check on her. Send someone if the fever gets worse or if she shows signs of distress." That night, Gideon slept in the foreman's cabin while Tom bunked with the hands. Maria and Rosa took turns watching over Fiona and caring for the twins. Gideon tried to sleep, but every time he closed his eyes, he saw Fiona's face, felt the trust in her eyes when she had asked him to promise her children would be safe. He was up before dawn, as always, but instead of heading out to work the ranch, he found himself in the kitchen where Rosa was feeding one of the twins. "The mother?" he asked. "Fever is high," Rosa said softly. "Maria is with her now, trying to keep her cool. She has not woken since the doctor left." Gideon climbed the stairs to his bedroom and knocked softly before entering. Maria looked up from where she sat beside the bed, wringing out a cloth in a basin of water. "How is she?" "Fighting," Maria said simply. "She is a strong one, this girl. She wants to live for those babies." Gideon approached the bed and looked down at Fiona. In sleep, with her face clean of dust and blood, she looked younger than he had first thought. Maybe 22 or 23 at most. Pretty, despite the pallor of illness and the hollows in her cheeks that spoke of recent hardship. Her blonde hair spread across his pillow, and her hands, even in unconsciousness, moved restlessly as if searching for her children. "Tell her when she wakes that the babies are fine," Gideon said. "Tell her they are safe and healthy, and she does not need to worry about anything except getting well." "You tell her yourself," Maria said with a knowing look. "She should hear it from you." Gideon spent the morning handling ranch business, but his mind was elsewhere. He organized a burial detail for Fiona's husband and sent 2 men into Miles City to see if anyone knew about a wagon that had been expected. He went through the supplies they had salvaged from the wreck, looking for anything that might tell him more about Fiona Owens and her family. He found a Bible with names written inside the cover. Charles Owens, born 1855 in Ohio. Fiona Mee Parker, born 1860 in Illinois. Married March 1881. Beneath that, in fresher ink, Emma Rose and Alina Grace Owens, born April 1882. So Fiona was 22, just as he had guessed, and her husband had been 27. They had married a little over a year ago, and the twins had come quickly after. There were letters, too, from someone named Sarah in Chicago, urging Fiona to reconsider, to stay where she was safe instead of heading west to God-forsaken Montana territory. Fiona had not listened. He found a tintype photograph, carefully wrapped in cloth. A young Charles Owens stood stiff and formal beside a seated Fiona, his hand on her shoulder. They both looked serious, as people did in photographs, but there was something in Fiona's eyes, a hint of reservation that made Gideon wonder about their marriage. That evening, he was in the barn checking on a mare that was due to foal when Rosa came running. She is awake. The fever broke an hour ago, and now she is asking for her babies. Gideon dropped everything and ran to the house. He took the stairs 2 at a time and burst into the bedroom, only to stop short at the sight of Fiona propped up against his pillows, a baby in each arm, tears streaming down her face as she held them close. "Thank you," she said when she saw him, her voice stronger than it had been but still weak. "Maria told me everything you did, how you found us, brought us here, sent for the doctor. You saved our lives." Gideon felt heat rise in his face. Anyone would have done the same. "No," Fiona said firmly. "Not anyone. Many men would have taken what they wanted from the wagon and left us there." "You did not. Why?" He had no answer for that, at least none that he could put into words. "This ranch has everything except what matters," he found himself saying, surprising himself with the truth of it. "This ranch needs a family like yours." Fiona stared at him, her green eyes searching his face. "What do you mean?" Now that he had started, Gideon could not seem to stop. "I mean stay. At least until you are healed and can figure out where you want to go next. There is plenty of room here. Maria and Rosa can help with the babies. You can recover in peace and not have to worry about anything." "I cannot just stay here," Fiona protested. "It would not be proper. What would people think?" "Let them think what they want. Out here we make our own rules." Gideon pulled up a chair and sat down, suddenly tired. "Your husband, we brought him back. We can bury him tomorrow if you are up to it. Do you have family, people we should contact?" Fiona's face crumpled. "Charles was all the family I had left. My parents died when I was 18. I was working as a seamstress in Chicago when I met him. He seemed kind, stable. He wanted to start fresh out west, said there was opportunity here. I thought it would be an adventure." She laughed bitterly. "Some adventure. Where were you headed, Helena?" "Charles had heard there was work there, maybe a store to buy. We never made it." She looked down at her daughters, her expression softening. "Now I have nothing. No money, no husband, no way to care for my children." "You have somewhere safe to stay while you figure things out," Gideon said. "That is something." Over the next few weeks, a routine established itself at the Hartley ranch. Fiona remained bedridden, her leg healing slowly but surely. The infection cleared up completely after a few touch-and-go days, and color began to return to her cheeks. Maria and Rosa cared for the twins during the day, but Gideon found himself spending more and more time in the house, drawn by the sound of baby laughter and the sight of Fiona growing stronger. He would sit with her in the evenings after the day's work was done, sometimes reading aloud from books or newspapers, sometimes just talking. She was smart, well-read despite her limited education, and had opinions on everything from politics to farming techniques. She made him laugh with stories about growing up poor in Illinois. About the summer she and her friends had tried to start a secret society and ended up accidentally setting a neighbor's haystack on fire. "I was a wild child," she admitted one evening as golden September light filtered through the bedroom window. "My mother despaired of me ever becoming a proper lady. She said I asked too many questions and spoke my mind too freely." "Sounds exhausting." Gideon said with a grin. I am being serious. It was not easy for her, raising a daughter alone after my father died. She wanted me to marry well, be taken care of. Instead, I fell in love with ideas and books and the notion that women should have the same opportunities as men. Is that why you married Charles? Because he offered you opportunity? Fiona was quiet for a long moment. I married Charles because I was alone and afraid, and he seemed like a safe choice. Not a love match, but a practical one. I thought I could grow to love him. She paused. I am not sure I ever did, not really. Does that make me a terrible person? That my husband is dead, and what I feel most is relief that I no longer have to pretend. It makes you honest, Gideon said softly. Their eyes met and held, and something passed between them, some acknowledgement of a connection that had been growing since that first moment in the ravine. Gideon wanted to reach out to take her hand, but he held back. It was too soon. She was grieving, whether she admitted it or not, and vulnerable. He would not take advantage of that, but he could not stop thinking about her. At night, lying alone in the foreman's cabin, he imagined what it would be like to have her here permanently, not as a guest recovering from tragedy, but as something more. He thought about those babies, how they smiled now when they saw him, how Emma had taken to grabbing his finger and refusing to let go. He had never wanted children of his own, too focused on building the ranch to think about a family. Now he could not imagine his life without these 3 people in it. September turned to October, and Fiona was finally allowed out of bed. Doc Morrison had been pleased with her progress, declaring the bone set well and straight. She would walk with a slight limp for the rest of her life, he said, but she would walk. Her first venture outside was on a crisp October morning when the cottonwoods along the creek had turned golden, and the air smelled of autumn. Gideon helped her down the porch steps, his hand firm under her elbow as she navigated the stairs on her crutch. The twins were inside with Maria, and for the first time in 2 months, Fiona stood alone with Gideon in the cool morning air. It is beautiful, she breathed, looking out at the sweep of ranch land, the mountains purple in the distance, the big sky overhead. I never got to really see it before. When we were traveling, I was always so worried about the babies, about making camp, about keeping up. I never just stopped to look. This land gets into your blood, Gideon said. I have had offers to sell, move back east where life is easier, but I cannot imagine leaving. This is home. Fiona turned to look at him, and her expression was serious. I need to talk to you about what happens next. I have been imposing on your hospitality for 2 months now. It is time I figured out where I am going to go, what I am going to do. You do not have to go anywhere, Gideon said quickly, too quickly. He cleared his throat and tried again. What I mean is, there is no rush, take your time. Figure out what you want. What I want, Fiona laughed, but there was no humor in it. What I want is impossible. I want to stay here. I want my daughters to grow up on this beautiful land with good people around them. I want to wake up every morning and see those mountains. I want to feel safe. She shook her head. But I cannot ask that of you. You have already done so much. You are not asking, Gideon said, his heart pounding. I am offering. Stay, Fiona. Stay as long as you want, forever if it suits you. People will talk. Let them. It is not proper. A single woman living on a ranch with a single man. Then marry me. The words hung in the air between them, shocking them both. Gideon had not planned to propose, had not thought beyond wanting her to stay. But now that the words were out, he realized he meant them completely. Fiona stared at him, her mouth open. You cannot be serious. I am completely serious. Gideon turned to face her fully, taking both her hands in his. I know it is fast. I know you are still recovering, still grieving, but I care about you, Fiona. I care about Emma and Alina. These past 2 months, having you here, it has made me realize how empty my life was before. This ranch does need a family. It needs your family. And I think maybe you need us too." Tears spilled down Fiona's cheeks. "Gideon, I cannot marry you just because I need a place to stay. That would not be fair to you." "Is that the only reason?" he asked quietly. "Because if you feel nothing for me, then I will take back my offer and we will figure out something else. But if there is any part of you that feels what I feel, this connection between us, then give us a chance. We do not have to be in love right away. We can grow into it like you said you wanted with Charles. Except this time, I think it might actually work." Fiona pulled one hand free and touched his face, her fingers gentle against his bearded cheek. "I do feel something," she admitted. "I've tried not to because it seemed too soon, too complicated. But when I see you with my girls, when you sit with me in the evenings and we talk, I feel something I never felt with Charles. I feel seen. I feel like myself." "Then marry me," Gideon said again. "Marry me and let us make this family real." "Yes," Fiona whispered. "Yes, I will marry you." He kissed her then, gentle and careful, mindful of all she had been through. It was a kiss of promise more than passion, a commitment to the future they were choosing together. When they broke apart, both of them were smiling. They married 3 weeks later in the small church in Miles City, with Doc Morrison standing up as witness and Maria weeping happy tears in the front pew. Fiona wore a new dress that Rosa had sewn for her, deep blue calico that brought out the color of her eyes. The twins, now 6 months old and thriving, were passed around the congregation like precious treasures. It was a simple ceremony, brief and to the point, but when the preacher declared them man and wife, Gideon felt something settle in his chest, some last piece of himself clicking into place. The ranch hands had organized a celebration back at the house, with music and dancing and more food than seemed possible. Gideon danced with his new wife under the Montana stars, holding her carefully because she still tired easily and thought that he had never been happier. That night, in the bedroom that was now theirs to share, they were awkward and uncertain with each other. Fiona had been married before, but she confessed that Charles had not been a particularly attentive husband. Gideon, for his part, had experience but none with someone he actually cared about, someone whose pleasure and comfort mattered as much as his own. They took it slow, learning each other with patience and tenderness. When they finally came together, it was with a sense of rightness that surprised them both. This was not just physical need being met. This was connection, intimacy, the beginning of something real and lasting. In the weeks that followed, they settled into married life with surprising ease. Fiona proved to be a quick learner when it came to ranch management, keeping the books with neat precision and taking over the household accounts from Maria. She had a good head for numbers and noticed inefficiencies that Gideon had overlooked. Together, they made the ranch run smoother and more profitably than it ever had before. The twins grew and thrived, reaching milestones that filled both Gideon and Fiona with pride. Emma spoke her first word, Dada, looking right at Gideon as she said it, and he had to turn away to hide the tears in his eyes. Eleanor followed soon after, not to be outdone by her sister. They learned to crawl, to pull themselves up on furniture, to toddle around the house causing mischief. Winter came to Montana with a vengeance, but the Hartley household was warm and full of laughter. Gideon taught Fiona to ride, and on clear days they would bundle up the twins and ride out to check the cattle, the girls secure in slings against their parents' chests. Fiona learned to cook Maria's recipes, and to mend fences, and to read the sky for signs of coming weather. And somewhere along the way, affection deepened into love. It happened gradually, so slowly that neither of them could pinpoint the exact moment. But by the time spring arrived, painting the prairie with wildflowers, they both knew it was real. "I love you," Fiona said one evening in May as they sat on the porch watching the sunset. The twins were asleep inside, and the ranch was quiet except for the evening songs of birds. "I need you to know that. This started as convenience, maybe, or necessity, but it is not anymore. I love you, Gideon Hartley, with my whole heart." "I love you too," Gideon replied, pulling her close. "I think I have loved you since the moment I saw you in that ravine, fighting so hard to protect your babies. You are the strongest, bravest woman I have ever known." They kissed as the sun sank behind the mountains. Two people who had found each other in the most unlikely of circumstances and built something beautiful from tragedy and chance. Summer brought its own joys and challenges. The ranch prospered, with good calves born and cattle prices high. Gideon hired more hands to help with the increased herd, and Fiona oversaw the expansion of the garden, putting up vegetables for the winter. The twins celebrated their first birthday with a party that drew neighbors from miles around, and Gideon marveled at how his quiet bachelor ranch had become the center of a community. But it was in the fall, as the leaves turned gold again and the year came full circle from when they had met, that Fiona came to him with news that made his heart soar. "I am pregnant," she said, her hands on her still flat belly. "I am sure of it. Maria confirmed it. We are going to have a baby, Gideon. Our baby." He swept her into his arms, spinning her around until she laughed and begged him to stop. "When? Spring. April or May, Maria thinks." They told the twins that night, even though Emma and Alina were too young to understand. "You are going to be big sisters," Fiona told them as they sat on the floor of the nursery. "There is going to be a baby brother or sister for you to play with." Emma clapped her hands. Alina stuck her thumb in her mouth and looked skeptical, which made both parents laugh. The pregnancy progressed smoothly, and Fiona bloomed with health. She had been so thin and worn when Gideon first found her, but now she was strong and vital, her skin glowing and her eyes bright. She worked alongside him almost until the end, only reluctantly agreeing to rest when Doc Morrison put his foot down. Their son was born on a warm April morning in 1884, arriving quickly and easily compared to the difficult birth of the twins. Gideon was there, holding Fiona's hand, and when the baby let out his first cry, he felt tears stream down his face. "A boy," Doc Morrison announced, placing the infant on Fiona's chest. "A healthy, strong boy." They named him James, after Gideon's father, with the middle name Charles, honoring the man whose death had brought Fiona to them. It seemed only right to acknowledge that twist of fate, that tragedy that had led to such happiness. James was an easy baby, content and smiley, and the twins adored him from the start. Emma liked to bring him toys, and Alina would sing to him in her baby voice. Watching them together, Gideon sometimes had to stop and marvel at his life, at how much it had changed in less than 2 years. "Do you ever think about that day?" Fiona asked him one evening as they sat on the porch, watching the children play in the yard. Emma and Alina were chasing fireflies while Maria held James, bouncing him gently. "The day you found us. All the time," Gideon admitted. "I think about what might have happened if I had ridden a different fence line that day, if I had not heard the babies crying, if I had been the kind of man who would have passed by." "But you were not," Fiona said, reaching for his hand. "You stopped. You helped. You gave us everything." "You gave me everything," Gideon corrected. "This ranch was just land and cattle before you came. Now it is a home. Now it means something." As the years passed, the Hartley family continued to grow and thrive. 2 more children came, a daughter they named Grace in 1886, and another son, Thomas, in 1888. The ranch expanded as well, becoming one of the most successful operations in eastern Montana. But success was never what mattered most to Gideon. What mattered was the laughter that filled his house, the knowledge that his children would grow up surrounded by love, the feeling of Fiona beside him every night. Emma and Alina grew into bright, curious girls who could ride almost before they could walk. They were different in temperament, Emma bold and adventurous while Alina was thoughtful and careful, but they were inseparable. As they got older, Gideon and Fiona told them the truth about their birth father, about the accident and how they had come to the ranch. The girls listened solemnly, but Emma spoke for both of them when she said, "Papa Gideon is our real father. He is the one who chose us." James grew tall and strong with his father's dark hair and his mother's green eyes. He had a gift with animals, and by the time he was 10, could gentle a wild horse better than most grown men. Grace was the spitfire of the family, full of opinions and energy, always getting into scrapes that her older siblings had to rescue her from. Thomas, the baby, was sweet-natured and gentle, content to follow wherever his siblings led. The ranch became known not just for its quality cattle but for the hospitality of its owners. Fiona made sure that no traveler was ever turned away from their door, remembering too well what it felt like to be desperate and alone. They took in drifters who needed work, families who needed help, anyone who crossed their path with a genuine need. More than one person started their Montana life at the Hartley Ranch before moving on to establish their own place. In 1890, Montana became a state, and Gideon and Fiona rode into Miles City with all 5 children to celebrate. The town had grown considerably since that day 8 years earlier, when Gideon had carried Fiona's husband's body to the undertaker. There were paved streets now, brick buildings, even talk of electricity coming within a few years. The Wild West was being tamed, civilization creeping in, but Gideon did not mind. Change was not always bad. His own life was proof of that. That night, after the fireworks and speeches were done, after they had put all 5 exhausted children to bed in the hotel, Gideon and Fiona stood on the balcony of their room looking out at the town lights. "You ever regret it?" Gideon asked. "Marrying me so quickly, staying here instead of going somewhere else." Fiona turned to him, and even after 8 years of marriage, the love in her eyes still took his breath away. "How could I regret the best decision I ever made? You saved my life, Gideon. Not just that day in the ravine, but every day since. You gave me a home, a family, a purpose. You gave me love. Why would I regret that? Sometimes I worry that you settled, that you only married me because you had no other choice." "Listen to me," Fiona said firmly, taking his face in her hands. "I had choices. I could have taken the money you offered and gone back east. I could have found work in Miles City, made my own way. I chose you. I chose this life, and I would choose it again, 1,000 times over." He kissed her then, deeply and thoroughly, not caring who might see. After 8 years, she was still the only woman who had ever made his heart race, the only person he wanted to spend his life with. As the new decade began, the Hartley Ranch continued to prosper. Gideon took on more responsibilities in the community, serving on the school board and helping to organize the Cattlemen's Association. Fiona started a lending library in Miles City, donating books and encouraging other women to read and educate themselves. Together, they were pillars of their community, respected and admired, but home was still where they were happiest. On winter evenings, the whole family would gather in the parlor, the children playing games or reading while Gideon and Fiona sat together by the fire. On summer days, they would ride out as a family to picnic by the creek or check on distant parts of the ranch. They celebrated birthdays and holidays with enthusiasm, creating traditions that their children would remember all their lives. Emma and Alina turned 10 in the spring of 1892, and Gideon organized a party that brought people from all over the county. Looking at his daughters, so healthy and happy, laughing with their friends, he thought about that terrified young woman in the ravine, clutching her babies and begging him to save them. Fiona had saved herself, ultimately, through sheer determination and strength of will. But he was grateful that he had been there, that he had been the one to help, because it had led to this, to everything that mattered. That night, after the guests had gone home and the children were in bed, he and Fiona walked out to the spot where Charles Owens was buried. They had erected a proper stone years ago, with his name and dates and the words "beloved father of Emma and Alina." Fiona visited occasionally, especially on the anniversary of his death, and Gideon always came with her. "You think he would approve?" Fiona asked, as she did every year. "Of us, of how we have raised his daughters. I think he would be grateful," Gideon said. "Any father would want his children to be loved and cared for. That is what we have given them." Fiona nodded, laying a small bouquet of wildflowers on the grave. "Thank you, Charles," she said softly, "for bringing me west, even if it did not turn out as you planned. You gave me Emma and Alina, and that led me to Gideon and to the life I have now. I hope you have found peace." They walked back to the house hand in hand, the Montana stars brilliant overhead. The windows of their home glowed with lamplight, warm and welcoming, and Gideon could hear the faint sound of one of the children laughing inside. "This ranch needs a family like yours," Fiona said suddenly, echoing the words he had spoken to her all those years ago. "Do you remember saying that?" "I remember everything about that day," Gideon replied. "You were right," Fiona said, "but it is not just your ranch that needed us. We needed you too. We needed this. All of us together, that is what makes it complete." Over the following years, they watched their children grow into remarkable young people. Emma developed a passion for medicine after helping Doc Morrison with a difficult birth on a neighboring ranch, and she announced her intention to go back east to study nursing. Alina discovered a talent for writing, penning stories about life in Montana that were published in magazines across the country. James became Gideon's right hand on the ranch, learning everything his father could teach him about cattle and land management. Grace declared at age 12 that she was going to be the first female rancher in Montana, and refused to wear dresses when she could get away with it. Thomas, quiet and artistic, spent hours sketching the landscape and the animals, creating beautiful drawings that Fiona treasured. In 1895, when the twins were 13, they asked if they could visit Charles's grave together, just the two of them. Gideon and Fiona agreed, watching from a distance as their daughters sat by the headstone, talking to the father they had never known. When they came back, Emma spoke for both of them. "We wanted to thank him," she said, "for being brave enough to bring Mama west even though it cost him his life, because if he had not, we would never have known Papa Gideon. We would never have had this family. So in a way, he gave us everything by dying." It was a mature thought for a 13-year-old, and it made Fiona cry. But they were happy tears, shed for the beautiful people her daughters were becoming, for the family that had been forged from tragedy and love. The turn of the century brought new challenges and opportunities. The railroad expanded through eastern Montana, making it easier to get cattle to market, but also bringing more settlers who fenced off traditional grazing land. Gideon had to adapt, focusing more on breeding quality stock rather than running large herds on open range. It was Fiona who suggested they diversify, adding sheep and horses to their operation, and it proved to be a wise decision. In 1900, Emma left for nursing school in Chicago, the first of their children to leave home. It was hard watching her go, but Gideon and Fiona were proud of her determination to pursue her dreams. She promised to write every week, and she kept that promise faithfully. Eleanor published her first book in 1902, a collection of stories about growing up on a Montana ranch. It was dedicated to Mama and Papa, who gave me a story worth telling. The book was well received, and Eleanor became a sought-after speaker, traveling around the country sharing her experiences of Western life. James married in 1903, a sweet girl named Catherine from Miles City, and brought her home to the ranch. Gideon and Fiona built them a house on the property, wanting to keep their son close. When Catherine had their first child in 1904, making Gideon and Fiona grandparents for the first time, it felt like the circle was complete. The baby was a girl, and they named her Fiona, which made her grandmother cry with joy. Grace did indeed become a rancher, taking over more and more of the daily operations as Gideon slowed down. She had his head for business and Fiona's determination, a formidable combination. She refused all suitors, declaring that she had no time for romance when there was work to be done. And Gideon respected her choice even as he hoped she might someday find what he had found with Fiona. Thomas surprised everyone by going to art school in San Francisco in 1905. His paintings of Montana landscapes became popular with wealthy Easterners who wanted a piece of the romantic West to hang in their homes. He sent money home regularly, insisting that his parents had given him the foundation to pursue his dreams, and he wanted to contribute to the ranch's success. By 1910, Gideon was 60 years old and Fiona was 50. They had been married for 28 years, and every day Gideon still thanked whatever force had led him to that ravine on that August morning so long ago. The ranch was thriving, their children were healthy and happy, and they had created a legacy that would last for generations. One evening in late summer, they rode out together to the spot where he had found her. The ravine had been smoothed by years of weather, and it was hard to pinpoint exactly where the wagon had crashed, but they both could feel it in their bones. 28 years, Fiona said softly. It feels like a lifetime and like yesterday at the same time. Best 28 years of my life, Gideon replied, though I suspect the next 28 will be even better. Fiona laughed. You are an optimist. I am a realist. As long as I have you, every year gets better. They dismounted and sat on the grass, watching the sun set just as they had countless times before. Fiona leaned against Gideon's shoulder and he wrapped his arm around her, holding her close. You ever wonder what would have happened if things had been different? Fiona asked. If Charles had not died, if we had made it to Helena? Sometimes, Gideon admitted, but I try not to dwell on it. We cannot change the past, and I would not want to even if we could. Everything that happened, as terrible as some of it was, led us here, led us to each other. I used to feel guilty, Fiona confessed, for being glad that things worked out the way they did. It felt wrong to be grateful for a tragedy that killed my first husband and left me broken and desperate. And now I understand that we can grieve for what was lost while still being grateful for what we found. Charles's death was a tragedy, but our life together is not built on that tragedy. It is built on the choice we made to love each other, to build something together. That is what matters. Gideon kissed the top of her head. You are wise, Mrs. Hartley. I have had a good teacher, Mr. Hartley. They sat in comfortable silence as the sky darkened and the stars came out. In the distance, they could see the lights of the ranch, could imagine their family there, James and Catherine with their children, Grace managing the evening chores, the hands settling in for the night. Home. I love you, Gideon said, not for the first time and not for the last. I will always love you." "I love you too," Fiona replied. "Thank you for finding me. Thank you for saving us. Thank you for giving us a life worth living." "Thank you for saying yes," Gideon countered. "Thank you for taking a chance on a lonely rancher who did not know what he was missing until he found you." They rode back to the ranch under the stars, the same stars that had looked down on them that first night 28 years ago when Gideon had carried a broken woman and 2 crying babies into his home and changed his life forever. The land rolled out around them, endless and beautiful, theirs and yet belonging to something larger than themselves. This was Montana. This was home. This was love. As they approached the house, they could see their family gathered on the porch, waiting for them. Grace waved and James called out a greeting. Catherine was rocking baby Fiona, now 6 years old, and the other grandchildren were playing in the yard. The sight made Gideon's heart swell with emotion. "This," he said to Fiona, gesturing at the scene before them. "This is what I meant when I said this ranch needs a family like yours. Not just Emma and Alina, though they are precious beyond measure, but all of this, everyone here, the laughter and love and life. You brought that. You made this happen." "We made it happen," Fiona corrected. "Together. That is how the best things are built, Gideon. Together." They dismounted and were immediately surrounded by family, pulled into conversations and laughter, and the beautiful chaos of a home filled with love. Gideon found himself standing back for a moment, just watching, trying to memorize the scene so he could hold on to it forever. Fiona caught his eye across the porch and smiled, that same smile that had captivated him from the beginning, and he knew that whatever came next, they would face it together. They had built something real and lasting, something that would outlive them both and touch generations to come. In the years that followed, they continued to thrive together. Emma came home from Chicago in 1912 with a husband in tow, a doctor named Samuel who was eager to practice medicine in the West. They settled in Miles City, and Emma opened a small clinic that served the surrounding ranches and farms. She became known for her skill and compassion, and Fiona beamed with pride every time she heard someone praising her daughter. Alina married in 1913, a fellow writer she had met at a literary conference in Denver. They split their time between the city and the ranch, and Alina continued to write, publishing 3 more books and countless articles. She made sure that the story of women in the West was told honestly, without romanticizing the hardship, but also celebrating the strength and resilience of frontier women. James and Catherine had 4 children by 1915, and they expanded their house to accommodate the growing family. James proved to be as good a father as Gideon had been, patient and loving while still teaching his children the value of hard work. The ranch operations had fully transitioned to him by then, with Gideon serving more as an advisor than an active manager. Grace never did marry, but she became one of the most successful ranchers in Montana, respected by men who had initially dismissed her because of her gender. She proved them all wrong through sheer competence and determination. In 1916, she was elected to the Montana state legislature, one of the first women to serve. Fiona cried with pride when she heard the news. Thomas's art career flourished, and his paintings were displayed in galleries across the country. But he always came home for the summers, spending long weeks at the ranch painting and reconnecting with his family. He never forgot where he came from, and his most treasured paintings were always the ones of home. By 1920, Gideon was 70 and Fiona was 60. They had slowed down considerably, content to let the younger generation run the ranch while they enjoyed their grandchildren and each other. They spent their days on the porch in good weather, reading and talking and watching the world go by. In the evenings, the family would gather, And they would tell stories about the old days, about how the ranch had started, about the day Gideon found Fiona in the ravine. The grandchildren never tired of hearing the story, though it had been told countless times. There was something magical about it, something that spoke to the power of chance and choice, of tragedy transformed into triumph, of love found in the most unlikely circumstances. "Tell us again, Grandpa," one of the younger ones would say. "Tell us about the day you found Grandma." And Gideon would settle back in his chair and begin the tale, his voice strong despite his age, his eyes finding Fiona's across the room as he spoke. She would smile and nod, adding details here and there, and together they would weave the story of their lives, the story that had become legend in their family. "I was riding fence line on a hot August morning," Gideon would begin, "never expecting that this day would change everything I thought I knew about loneliness and second chances." And Fiona would pick up the thread. "I was sure I was going to die in that ravine. My babies were crying, and I had no way to help them. Then I heard hoofbeats, and I looked up to see this tall, serious man staring down at me like he could not quite believe what he was seeing." The children would lean in, captured by the story even though they knew how it ended. Because the ending was all around them, in the thriving ranch, in the family that filled the house, in the love that was still evident between their grandparents after nearly 40 years of marriage. Emma and Alina, now in their late 30s, would sit with their own children and listen to the story of their dramatic beginning. They remembered none of it, of course, but they had grown up knowing that they were special, that they had been chosen and loved not just by birth but by decision. It had made them confident and secure, knowing that family was not just about blood but about commitment and love. As Gideon approached his 70th birthday in 1921, the family threw a huge celebration. People came from all over Montana to honor the man who had built one of the most successful ranches in the territory and raised a family that had become legendary for their kindness and integrity. There were speeches and toasts, and Gideon was embarrassed by all the attention, but secretly pleased. But the moment he treasured most came at the end of the evening when everyone else had gone to bed and he sat alone with Fiona on the porch, watching the stars. 70 years old, he mused. "I never thought I would make it this long." "You are too stubborn to die," Fiona teased. "You will outlive us all. Only if you are there with me. I cannot imagine this world without you in it, Fiona. You are my heart, my home, my everything." "And you are mine," she replied, taking his weathered hand in hers. "We have had a good life, Gideon. Better than I ever dreamed possible when I was lying in that ravine, sure I was going to die." "The best life," he agreed. "No regrets, no regrets," she echoed. They sat in peaceful silence, two people who had found each other against all odds and built something beautiful that would last long after they were gone. The ranch would continue, passed down through James and his children. The family would grow and change, but the foundation they had built of love and loyalty and perseverance would remain. In the spring of 1925, Fiona took ill with pneumonia. Doc Morrison, now in his 80s himself and long retired, came out of retirement to treat her personally. The whole family gathered, praying and hoping, but Fiona was 65 and her body was tired. She fought for 2 weeks, but in the end, surrounded by everyone she loved, she slipped away peacefully on a warm May morning. Gideon was devastated. They had been married for 43 years, and he had never spent a day without her since that moment in the ravine. The world seemed gray and empty without her light in it. But he carried on, because that was what Fiona would have wanted, because their children and grandchildren needed him to be strong. They buried her on a hill overlooking the ranch, with a view of the mountains she had loved. The headstone reads simply, Fiona Hartley, 1860–1925, beloved wife, mother, and grandmother. She made this house a home. At the funeral, Gideon spoke through his tears. 43 years ago, I found this remarkable woman in a ravine, broken and desperate, with two tiny babies in her arms. She asked me to save them. What she did not know was that by saving them, I was saving myself. Fiona gave me everything that matters: a family, a purpose, a reason to wake up every morning. She taught me that love is not just a feeling but a choice, a commitment to show up every day and do the work of building a life together. I will miss her every moment for the rest of my days, but I am grateful beyond measure for the time we had. Emma and Alina spoke as well, their voices strong despite their tears. Alina read from one of her books, a passage about her mother's strength and grace. Emma talked about how her mother had taught her to care for others, to see the humanity in every person, to never give up no matter how hard things got. James, Grace, and Thomas shared memories that made people laugh through their tears. The grandchildren sang Fiona's favorite hymns. And when they lowered her into the ground, it felt like a piece of Montana itself was being buried. So integral had Fiona become to the land and the community. Gideon lived for 3 more years after Fiona's death, and while he never stopped grieving, he found joy in his children and grandchildren. He spent his days on the porch, remembering, and his evenings surrounded by family. He made sure to tell each of his descendants, over and over, how much he loved them, how proud he was of them, how grateful he was for the life Fiona had given him. On a beautiful September evening in 1928, with the cottonwoods turning gold and the air crisp with the promise of autumn, Gideon Hartley died peacefully in his sleep. He was 78 years old and had lived a full, rich life. They buried him next to Fiona, and his headstone read, Gideon James Hartley, 1850–1928, beloved husband, father, and grandfather. He found us and made us a family. At his funeral, the church in Miles City was packed with people whose lives he had touched. The service was long, filled with stories and tributes, but the moment that captured everything came when Emma stood to speak. My father once told my mother that this ranch needed a family like ours, she said, her voice clear and strong. He was right, but not in the way he meant. This ranch, this land, this community, they all needed my parents. They needed their love, their strength, their belief that family is not just about blood but about choice and commitment. Papa Gideon chose us when he could have ridden past that ravine. Mama chose him when she could have gone back east. They chose each other every day for 43 years. That is the legacy they left us, not just this ranch or the success they built, but the knowledge that love is always a choice, and choosing love is always the right decision. In the years that followed, the Hartley Ranch continued to thrive under James's leadership, and later under his children. The family spread out across Montana and beyond, but they always came back for holidays and celebrations, drawn by the history and love that had started with a desperate woman in a ravine and a lonely rancher who stopped to help. Emma became one of the most respected doctors in Montana, treating patients well into her 70s. Alina published 12 books before she died at age 78, and her work is still read today. James ran the ranch until he was 70, then passed it to his oldest son, who passed it to his. Grace served in the state legislature for 20 years and was instrumental in passing laws that protected women's rights and property rights. Thomas's paintings hang in museums across the country, beautiful depictions of a Montana that no longer exists except in memory and art. The twins, Emma and Alina, never forgot that they had been chosen, that their lives had been saved by a man who had no obligation to them except common human decency. They passed that knowledge to their children, and their children's children, creating a family culture of service and compassion that touched hundreds of lives. The Hartley Ranch still stands today, over a century after Gideon found Fiona in that ravine. It is still run by their descendants, still profitable, still beautiful. And on a hill overlooking the land, there are two headstones side by side, marking the graves of a rancher and a woman he found abandoned with twin infants, who together built something that outlasted them both. Visitors to the ranch, especially family members bringing new generations to see where it all started, often stand at those graves and tell the story. They talk about chance and choice, about tragedy and triumph, about love found in the unlikeliest of circumstances. They remember Gideon's words, spoken on that first day when everything changed. This ranch needs a family like yours. But what Gideon came to understand, and what Fiona knew in her heart from the beginning, was that it was not just the ranch that needed them. They needed each other, needed the love they built together, needed the family they created from broken pieces and desperate circumstances. That was the real story, not just about survival but about flourishing, not just about making do but about building something beautiful. On warm summer evenings, when the wind whispers through the grass and the mountains turn purple in the fading light, some say you can still feel their presence on that ranch. Not as ghosts, but as something deeper, a foundation of love that soaked into the land itself and made it sacred. This was their home, their heart, the place where they transformed tragedy into triumph and built a legacy that will last as long as there are Hartleys to remember. And somewhere, in whatever place souls go when bodies give out, Gideon and Fiona are together still, watching over the family they created, the ranch they built, the love they proved was possible even in the hardest of circumstances. They found each other in a ravine on a hot August day in 1882, two broken people who put themselves back together and made something whole. That is not just their story. That is everyone's story who has ever taken a chance on love, who has ever chosen hope over despair, who has ever believed that broken things can be made beautiful again. The Hartley Ranch stands as proof that they were right, that this ranch truly did need a family like theirs, and that family needed this ranch, and most of all, they all needed each other. Love, as Gideon and Fiona proved, is always worth the risk, always worth the effort, always worth choosing every single day for as long as hearts keep beating and stars keep shining over the Montana prairie.